yesterday.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We would love to hear where you are in the world. Type that in the chat. My name is Catherine Mattice, founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We're a consulting firm focused on building positive, thriving, inclusive work environments. Super excited to have Anya Soto with me today. Good morning, Anya.
Hi, Catherine.
Anya and I became fast friends. As soon as we met, we realized we are in very much the same space. Anya is a stellar learning and development expert. She's an executive coach. She's been doing this for 20 years. And so Anya and I have actually been partnering on clients lately, and it's been really awesome. So, hi, Anya. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Hi. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks for inviting me. And yes, I agree with everything what she said. Totally.
What she said. So I brought you here today because you are definitely more of an expert in the DEI space than I am, for sure. So I saw a presentation that you did in our networking group around how we all have different identities, and DEI isn't, we get caught up in the race and gender thing, but there's so much more to it. So
Yeah.
talk to us about identities at work.
Oh, I love the work around identities and my own identity and how identities change and shift throughout life. Because I think so often we hire people, right? Or we interview someone, we're like, well, this is who you are. This is the school you went to. I can kind of predict your behavior. And we forget that human beings are so multidimensional and
Mhm.
going inside organizations and helping them really unpack first individual identities, right? Who am I? What do I bring? So that I can stay grounded in my contribution to organization. And to me, like that is leadership. And then we move organization into unpacking their organizational identity, which means who is the majority? And I'll give you an example. Let's say if I'm working with the software tech companies, most of them would be like late 20s, early 30s, liberal, white, well educated, middle class. And I say that because we get so like bought into this idea of like fitting in and cultural fit that we really forget about diverse perspectives and diverse life experiences.
Mhm.
So that to me is the main focus when I go into organization to really help individuals unpack their own identity, because I'm a big believer is everybody has a diversity story. And I want to bring white men back into the conversation, because them being excluded from diversity conversation and sitting in shame and guilt or feeling bad is not serving anybody. So
Mhm.
how do we bring them back into the conversation, help them craft their own diversity story with their own life experiences, and helping them become really powerful, influential allies of marginalized communities? That's my long answer to your short question.
No, I love that, because there is a lot of talk about white males being sort of pushed out of the conversation. Pshaw, you've been
Yeah.
hurting everyone for thousands of years.
Yeah. And how is that inclusion?
Yeah, yeah, and there's plenty who are feminists and who want to be a part of the DEI conversation, and
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. And I also want to like, I don't know if you've heard of it. I did not create it, but I love it. And I talk a lot about it. Diversity is inviting you to a dance party.
Hmm.
Inclusion is asking you to dance. And belonging is knowing the playlist. And I
Mm.
love that. It's like I have kids in high school and I often think, right? It's like, yeah, we hire diversity, but then we don't invite them to lunches. We make assumption, oh, she's a single mom. She's not gonna go to a weekend retreat. Oh, he's like a dad who's like, oh, he's into rock punk. I don't know, like he will not play whatever game we're playing.
Yeah.
And belonging is really about like inside jokes where I'm like, I don't get it. And people say, oh, that's like it's our inside joke. It happened 2 years ago. And I'm like, well,
Mm.
I guess I'm not like part of the cool kids club.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Michael. One of my friends, Michael Solar, is here, and he says, "Can you talk about the trend referring from belonging rather than inclusion?" Which you just kind of did, but maybe really
Yeah,
clear.
the trend is, thanks, Michael, for the question. It's like we started with, and I don't even know, 7, 10 years ago, we have really popularized the idea of like fitting in. Like, are you a cultural fit? Are you a cultural fit? And I think we had good intentions, because what we meant back then is Do you align with the mission of the company? Here's what we do. And you align with the values of the company, which is this is how we do it.
Right.
And then it became very kind of like toxic. It took a form of assimilation. We
Mhm.
decided like, okay, this is a culture fit. This is who works here. This is how we do it. Here's how it's done. And you come in, we hire this diversity. We spend a ton of money seeking out diverse talent. We bring them in and then we say, okay, if you want to work here, you're going to become one of us.
Mhm.
So that's the old paradigm. Had
Mhm.
good intentions, the execution was kind of like poor. So now the new trend is, what is the culture of belonging? So
Mhm.
if fit in is all about assessing, I'm constantly assessing, and I am an immigrant with an accent. I am a gay woman. Like I am constantly assessing 24/7, and it
You
takes
have an accent? I didn't notice. Just
yeah, a little, a little. But it's like assessing, adjusting, blending in, code switching. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna like hang out with these people because then people gonna like group me with them. It
Mhm.
takes so much mental space. Belonging is about human connections.
Mhm.
Remembering that businesses are human systems. You can have
Mhm.
all the softwares you want, all the technology you want, artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, they're run by humans.
Mhm.
Humans that have emotions, humans that get triggered, humans that, I don't know, lose themselves and lose their, I don't know, brains at work. So it's about human connection. It's about authenticity. And that's where
Mhm.
we go to identity. I know who I am. I don't need
Mhm.
to be blending in. And I
Mhm.
know who I am now. I didn't 20 years ago. It's about trust building. It's about teaching our leaders how to build trust and safe spaces. We talk a lot about psychological safety,
Mhm.
which means it is a learnable skill. If you need to learn it, me and Catherine teach it. Learn how to build trust with your people so they feel safe to show
Mhm.
up at themselves. They offer wacky ideas, like innovate, take risks, have courageous conversations. All of that is the new paradigm of inclusion, helping people feel safe in who they are, what they bring, what their contribution is.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just thinking as you were talking, and I'd be curious if what your thoughts are. And then I see my other friend Suze also has a question. So hi, Suze. I'll get to your question
Yes.
in 1 second. Um, and maybe it's just my age and or the algorithms that are fed to me, right, because of the things I click on. But I feel like there's a lot more people these days kind of going, this is who I am and take it or leave it. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of that messaging coming through in my TikToks and my Facebook things. And
I'm
is that
sorry, this is your age. This
is
is
it
your age.
my age? Okay.
It
Dang it.
is.
I was wondering if it was just
My thought process, and what I was actually surprised, I just learned, I read a scientific journal that actually said women in their 40s and 50s really like there's a hormonal change because we don't need to procreate anymore. We've been married, we've been divorced, we've had kids, like all of that is done. And
yeah.
we really, since we don't need to procreate anymore, we really stop caring that much. It's like it's physical. We're like, I don't care. You
Yeah.
see women. So yes, in your 40s, I think by 40 is when you know you're like, okay, I think I
And you really
kind
know
of
who you are.
got it. I think I
Yeah.
kind of got it. I think I know who I am and I will not compromise my authentic identity. But in my 30s, I was totally blending in. And even
Yeah.
now, it's like, look, my name is Soto. Like clearly, I don't have a Hispanic background. That was my another attempt, right, at like hiding and blending in, because
Wow.
my um, previous name was Romanova. Like, how Russian is that? I don't want to be Romanova because you know how many opportunities I lost because of that last name.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the thing. But now I'm like, I can be Romanova, I can be Sokol. Like, I don't care anymore because
Yeah.
I know what I bring. But that's like it takes time.
Okay. So you're saying I'm old. Got it. Okay.
We are old, and I
We
love
are old. Yes.
it. And I love it.
So Suze, thanks. And I love seeing a lot of people I know. Jill is here. Hi, Jill. Warms my heart. So Suze's question is, I'm having a challenge incorporating a culture. Actually, let me put it here. I forget I can do that. I'm
Mm.
having a challenge incorporating a culture of belonging in an old school organization. What would you recommend be my first step?
I would recommend to start exploring who are the majority in the old school organization, right?
Mm,
It's like when we talked about, I don't know, in the beginning about organizational identity, right? And what are some like common bias and stereotypes? And in our organization, right, we would say, well, we believe like everybody needs to have at least bachelor degree, but really masters, we believe, and like start identifying those kind of like groups and most common bias that people have and start exploring them, and are they serving us or not. I like to say with globalization, the world is changing. The
mhm,
world is becoming less white, less male. If you look at who are the people that are buying products, it's women. It's not
mhm,
men. Women buy products. So are we speaking to our customers in whatever
mhm,
service industry you're in? Who is missing at our table? That's what I like the question to ask. When you start identifying, and again, please ask us, we have a lot of like trainings on it. When we start identifying our groupings, right? And every organization, depending on your industry, will have very different groupings, but we've worked with most of them. And then we start asking ourselves, who is missing at our table? Who
mhm,
is not part of the conversation? Who is not making those decisions? And really, it's some leaders might have to work with Catherine if they're really resistant. Sometimes we do need one-on-one. I often offer that we start with executive team and get their buy-in. And I can come in and show you business case after business case after business case of like why inclusion is important. Like, yes, diversity, but you will keep losing diverse talent if you don't create that culture of belonging. And I think it's part educating, part exploring, part revealing and reflecting, and part
mhm.
doing the work for leaders as individuals. Where am I biased? Like, what am I not seeing? And trust me, I've been doing this work for many years, and I'm still uncovering a lot of bias and stereotypes and beliefs that I was raised in, that society has made me believe all the every day. I don't know about you, Catherine. I'm curious. I feel like I'm always learning new things and uncovering that. I'm like, oh, wow, where did that come from?
For sure, there is often a little voice where I think something and then I think, oh my gosh, I just thought that. But
Yeah,
that's awareness is half the battle, right?
yeah,
Recognizing that, wow, where did that thought come from? And
yeah,
let's not have that thought again because it was,
yeah,
not okay. But so to go back to Suze's question, she's a mid-level manager in
yeah,
a large old school global organization. So in some ways, they're focused on equity and inclusion. They're global, but I also know, here in America where she is, maybe her office, I'm just putting words in your mouth, Suze, maybe her office is like mostly white male, for example. So
mhm.
what could Suze do today to start getting the people around her to be open to conversations around, belonging?
It's so hard to do alone. Like,
Yeah.
it's so hard to do alone. That's why I'm like, if there's any way that you can invite and we can send you a lot of language in around it to start having those conversations and start finding allies internally who are seeing what you're seeing, who are feeling what you're feeling, start having conversations. And then we always say when clients come to us, and Catherine and I were on many sales calls together, and they say, well, we want to start our DNI initiative. Where do
Hmm.
we even start? Let's educate all employees. We always say we only start with executive teams, because
Hmm.
executive team and a leadership team, if they're not like truly bought in, and
Hmm.
one of the questions I love personally asking is, where in your life did you feel like you didn't belong?
Hmm.
It's such a good question. Ask any human being, whether it's in their childhood or their parents going through divorce or them going to college or not going to college, having a car, not having a car. Because empathy, right, is not that we had the same experience. It's that I know what it feels like to not
Hmm.
belong. And I think that is a huge shift for people. It's like, oh wow, like yeah, I know what that feels like. I
Hmm.
I am like I was one of those kids that was like chubby. Like
Yeah.
that pain is deep. It never goes away. So I mean, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you, but my initial response is like find allies,
That's a
bring
great
in
answer. Yeah.
consultants, trainers, and let's start educating people. Because the thing is, most people I find have good intentions. They want to do this work. They just don't have the language. They don't know what to say. They say nothing.
Yep.
which is like also damaging. So
Yeah, I often joke about being an HR ninja, but in this case, it's a belonging ninja. Where yeah, you kind of start infiltrating the culture on your own by talking to people, finding allies, and then as you develop allies and you become aware of who else is interested in this conversation, then you can approach the leader. Hey, could we do some stuff around this? There's 15 of us who want to, and you can. It's hard and it's a long road, but yeah, I think
I actually have a perfect example. I was working with the like government institution, and I worked with one of their managers, senior managers. And what we did, which was a super powerful move, we just started doing work inside their team. We built team agreements. We did really like a lot of work in like where people felt like psychologically safe, and that team started outperforming all the other teams because they were innovating like crazy. They had hard conversations, they were giving feedback, everyone was like super aligned. And I think that what started like, what are you doing?
Mhm.
Like, what is happening with this team? What are we not doing? Tell us. That was like, that's it. Just as you were speaking, I'm like, wow, honestly, dude, if you're a manager, if you're in a leadership role, people report to you, be the best, most inclusive leader that retains people, that promotes people, and they will notice. Like, they cannot not notice.
I love that. And then you have a case study.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. All right, we have some other questions. So Michael's asking perspective around remote and hybrid and being in the office and all of that. Certainly, it can be difficult
Yeah.
to foster a culture of belonging and safety if people are dispersed.
Michael, such good questions. Is that the same Michael?
Michael and I are friends. We've known each other for
I'm
quite.
like, did you pay him? Like, he's asking really good.
I'll pay you later, Michael.
So I'm going to talk a little bit. So here's my perspective on hybrid, remote. I think here's what I believe. I believe in hybrid, but I believe in very intentional hybrid. If
Mhm.
you're like, well, I want people to be 2 days in the office, and I come on a days when people I'm working with are not there, what's the point? So insufficient. But if you say, hey, Tuesday and Wednesday are like design days, our production days, our team meetings days. This is when we get together. We're super intentional why we're here. Everybody's here on that day. And then the rest of the week, do whatever you want. I do believe in getting together with teams. I do believe in, like, again, going back to element of belonging and building trust, like that kind of stuff, like having lunches, having conversations about life, ask me about my kids and my partners and whatever. So I'm a big believer, but in being very intentional. If we do ask people to come to the office on certain days, why? Why
Mm-hmm.
am I here? And what are we trying to achieve? If it is remote, and again, like we like now people have remote teams all over the world, it's even more important to learn about how do we include. A couple of tips I have: always make sure everybody knows each other in a meeting. I mean, unless
Mm-hmm.
it's at 200 people, but it's like if they're like 12, 15 people, and some people know each other, some people don't know each other, this is your job. Whoever facilitates that meeting, it is your job to make sure everybody knows each other, everybody knows why they're here, everybody knows why they were invited. That's another thing I see. I'm like in the meeting, I'm like, what is the agenda? Why am I here? Like
Yeah.
that creates a lot of disengagement, and people
Mm-hmm.
feel that, right? Disengagement is contagious. Make sure you hear from everyone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, if we're valuing diversity, you invite me to a meeting, I assume if I'm here you want to hear my perspective. But no, you actually are never interested in my perspective. Know that there are people who are quiet, people who are shy. That's inclusion. Create tools. Maybe it's a poll, so it's anonymous. All of our trainings have an element of anonymity, because I believe that some people don't like being put on a spot. They're not prepared. So it's like, how do we include introverts and extroverts? How do we give Anya some time to talk because she likes hearing her own voice, but like someone else needs to have a more anonymous way? But we're always engaging people and making sure everyone is included. And the big one, last one, I'll say, acknowledge the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Like I did just right now, Michael, right? I said, wow, Michael, such a good question. Because if people, you asking questions and they're answering and you're never acknowledging, guess what's going to happen?
They'll stop talking.
Why am I contributing? Nobody cares about my opinion anyway. So those
Yeah.
are kind of like, I hope that's helpful, but there's so much more. And
I
oh,
love
he also talked about specific to my industries. I see in the comments, engineering, architecture,
it.
construction. Again, I work a ton with construction. I work with governments, engineering, love them. Again, a lot of them, like, they are introverts, they're very analytical. So as a leader, I want you to start thinking, like, what type of meetings would resonate with them, and source it from people. Do
Mhm.
you like meeting every week? Do we need to meet every week? Would you like, what do you guys want? We're always kind of like sourcing and including opinions, and then creating meetings and agendas to serve our people. That's why
Mhm.
we do it. Not because we've always had it on Monday morning and we
Right.
can keep it have it. Why are we having it? Why are we having it on Monday? Why at 10? And what are we here to solve?
Yeah. I want to add to something. This
Yeah.
is a story I talk a lot about actually when I'm coaching leaders about their communication, and I used to tell it a lot when I taught college. To think about how a lot of times with communication, we just sort of do it, right? Here we are, we're just talking, Anya and I know a lot about these topics and we're friends and we're just, blah, 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 blah. But in a situation like this on LinkedIn, we have to be more intentional. We want to make sure the message comes across and all of that. And I know a lot of times we get really intentional in some places and not in others. And we have to be more intentional more often. And so the quick story is I used to teach public speaking at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, where Marines who were voluntold to be a recruiter, they come to recruiter school here in San Diego for 2 months. And part of that recruiter school was to go through a 2-day public speaking class. And I remember my boss on that contract giving me feedback that I needed to be more intentional and clear and concise when giving feedback to, they would give a speech and then I would give them feedback in front of the whole room. They would sit down, the next person would give a speech, I would give them feedback. And I just remember feeling, and that there was 2 classes back to back, so it was 4 days. By that 4th day, I was so exhausted. And all I had been doing was sitting in my seat, watching speeches and giving feedback. But because I was so focused on being intentional, it was tiring. And I'm
You're
sharing
paying
that story.
attention.
Yeah, and I'm sharing that story not to say everybody's got lots of room for all of this. Of course, we're burnt out and we're tired, and there's time and resources that we don't have. But just to recognize that communication is hard and it has to be intentional. And so I love what you're saying, Anya, that you can't just have a meeting that's an hour because it's always been that way. Could it be 15 minutes
Well,
or
that goes back to like bias, stereotypes, and starting
yeah,
to question, like, why are we doing things this way? And
yeah,
people hate people like that. Like, we're
yeah,
like that. That's why we become consultants, because I like to say I'm unemployable because I'm curious. I question things, but I'm like, but why? Why are we doing? Why are we meeting at this time? What
yeah,
is this for? Who is not invited? Why is this person not here? Why is this person is here? What is their contribution?
yep,
Yeah, I like start questioning organizational systems. It's like, because the systems were created by white privileged men. Like, we go back to, like, is it still working? Like,
yeah,
maybe it worked 100 years ago. The whole like 5-hour week, 9 to 5. Well, that nonsense. Like, is it relevant? Like, why are we still doing it out of
yeah,
habit? So totally intention, intention, intention.
yeah. Roger's got a question too. Let me show it. If you have trouble fitting in, would it lead to that person being isolated in the workplace? And what sort of impact would it have in interpersonal relationships? And Anya, we have about 3 minutes left. So give us a very intentional.
Someone has trouble fitting in. Would it lead to that person being isolated? Yes, of course it would have an impact. Well, what I'm hearing, and I don't know, Roger, if we're talking about like the employee perspective, right, versus a manager. If I'm a manager and I identify pretty quickly that someone, and some people have problem, not even like fitting in, but they maybe don't know, they're still questioning, where do I fit in? What is my thing? Definitely it would be challenging. But again, first I would start with clear an assumption. Like, is it my assumption? Like, what makes you think they don't feel like fitting in? Asking questions. How do you feel about the team? Where do you fit in? Where do you not fit in? Because
Mhm.
again, fitting in is such a blank, generous statement. It's like there are parts where I'm like, oh yeah, me and Catherine like totally aligned. And there are parts where I'm like, I don't want to be aligned. I want to have value generating conflict.
Mhm.
Right. So I don't know if you're a manager or not. Of course it will have impact on interpersonal relationships, but like don't make assumptions. If you're a manager, have a conversation, ask good questions, and coach them through like what is it that they believe about the group, and
Mhm.
what is it in the group that they feel like they have to fit in, and where do we actually create some almost like disbalance. I'm a rebel. I'm like, we don't want groupthink. We don't
Yep.
want everyone fitting in. We
Right.
want diversity of identities and perspectives.
Yep. And if you say that, you have to actually want them, right? Not just for the sake of saying it.
Yeah.
Our friend Jenna is here. She says, love
Hi,
to see Catherine
Jen.
and Anya. All right. Well, we have to pop off. So I just want to close with this. We've really brought her into Civility Partners, doing a lot of learning and development work with our clients. And Anya, I look forward to our continued partnership. And I love listening to all the things you have to
Oh,
say about
thank you.
inclusivity and belonging and everything. I love being your friend. So if you have other questions, which I see a few coming through, by all means,
I
Anya.
will make sure I'll go back and respond to your questions. So if you're watching this recording, please leave us questions and we'll make sure we come back and answer all your
Yeah.
questions.
And if you want to bring Anya into your organization, let me know. All right. Have a
Thank
great
you. Thanks,
day,
Dad.
everyone. See you
Thanks,
next week.
everyone. Thanks for the questions.
Yep.